welcome to the Daily Evolver, to another episode of The Shrink of the Pundit, where I, Jeff the Pundit, talk to my old buddy Keith Witt, Dr. Keith Witt, psychotherapist extraordinaire, about all things integral, now in our 7th year. And today we wanted to, we've invited people to send questions. So there have been a couple of questions that have come in that we both found quite interesting. And let me just read a paragraph from the one that will set us up for this conversation, which is very much in what we're talking about, and that is the differentiation of mean and good red and the integration of it. Mm-hmm. So here we go. This is from Leah. And Leah writes, I'd be interested to hear more about this idea of the, quote, unconscious request for external constraints. Example, how is such a request identified? Does the requester ever become aware of an unconscious request? Is this connected to the guilt humans are conditioned to assume via original sin or some other brand of existential guilt/unworthiness? So what is the, she's referring to something you've talked about, external constraints. What are we talking about? And, how does it ease our existential unworthiness, please?
And how does it fit into original sin? I mean, that was, I love that part of it.
Yeah.
So this was an exciting question to me. And there was another question that said, how have you guys changed?
Yeah, let me put that on the table too, and then we'll have both questions because they are very much in the same tradition here. Okay, Steve, this is from Steve. He's been listening for a long time. He always has very interesting things to say. And I'm going to read 3 paragraphs. It's because it sums up the gestalt.
Yeah.
He says, the intensity of our times has to be having an uncharted effect on our individual and collective interiors. The level of conversations must be deepening here and there as this new intensity brings forth heretofore unfelt, unheeded neural happenings. I personally find it easier to enter into exchanges that previously have been perhaps taboo or too embryonic to approach. So that's kind of cool, right?
Yes.
And he goes on, he talks about a former relationship that got canceled simply because she became an angry Trumper and I wasn't willing to go there. And that recently shifted due to a phone call where I heard myself telling her that I blamed the media and people have to find new ways to reconnect. So there's something afoot coming online if we have antenna for it. I have to believe that. So he says, let's see, a question for you and Keith. Can you, Jeff, and you, Dr. Keith, begin to identify an amplified awareness of, in the wake of these new and heavy external events, both personally and in your work and your interface with others? Do you see more intensified happiness, depression, optimism, pessimism, clarity, just plain God consciousness? Please answer.
But by the way, the answer to that last question is yes.
Yeah.
Do I see all those things? Yeah. So let's talk about the constraint thing.
Yeah.
You and I like to an integral really likes understanding the universe from an evolutionary standpoint. It no longer is something that I have to think about doing to begin my thinking about at the Big Bang. It's like everything starts at the Big Bang, and then there's the universe bias towards greater complexity that moves us forward. And as has been demonstrated endlessly in chaos theory, basically when you have opposing forces rubbing against each other, there's chaos and there's rigidity, and they meet each other with the opposing forces. At that meeting point, there's patterns that form, and those patterns sometimes are predictable. They're self-repeating. This is how this universe self-organizes. And every once in a while, there's a new pattern that's more stable and more complex, and the whole system shifts upward. And that's evolution. That's the driver of evolution. That's in the very fabric of the universe.
Yeah.
Opposing forces, gravity, and the Big Bang, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So with people, with our species, that's an intensely social species. Um, the rubbing together has been in our social interactions. You know, the last couple of million years, as humans have evolved, the brain has expanded, um, and everybody goes, well, it's expanded because we have more we can cook and we can concentrate calories. Okay, it's expanded because there were challenges on the velds. Yeah, yeah. But the bottom line is expanded because we've become more social. As the brain expanded, it's increased our social capacities. Most of the brain's dedicated to social interactions. And at its most fundamental level, and this is where we're getting to original sin, which is cool to me.
Hmm.
At a most fundamental level, what we do as humans is we cooperate under a mutually accepted set of rules, which is play. Okay, you and I right now are playing. We have a mutually accepted set of complex social rules about us and about the world, and we're engaging with each other with within the context of that, and it's enjoyable, it's pleasurable. Okay, and we both feel we can do this because our nervous systems are reading safety. This is the neuroception of safety, and this is going into the modern emphasis on Stephen Porges' polyvagal system, the hierarchical response that people have to the world. The first response is social engagement. Second response is fight, flight, and the third response is freeze. We prefer social engagement. Over the
Okay,
last
let's pause
month,
there.
okay,
That's pretty profound,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
really. I mean, it's part of, when you talk about, what we got going for us is social. What we have going for us in a bigger sense is just this growth in general. The
yeah.
thing you described about these polarities and this fight and this new integration, and that's been happening since the Big Bang, and it's built in. And that we and the reason we're people and not just subatomic particles continuing to bounce off of each other is this thing that we prefer sociability. And so do atoms, actually. Richard Feynman
Yes,
talked about that.
yes.
Physicists talk about that. He said, when you come right down to it, the best way to describe the movement of atoms is that they're playful. You
And,
know,
and cooperative.
yes,
I walk into a room and the bioluminescence from my body becomes coherent with the bioluminescence of a plant in the corner.
I know.
Are they're cooperating.
I know, me too.
Ugh. So humans, so we're biased, and going back to the hierarchical response, fight flight trumps freeze. If you freeze in terror or horror and you go start moving in fight flight, it cancels out freeze. If you're caught up in fight flight and you can engage social engagement, it cancels out fight flight. Okay, the
Hmm.
systems change internally. And for humans, the last million years, the biggest threat to humans has not been anything external to the human species. It's been humans.
Yeah.
Okay, when we read threat from the other person, what our nervous system says is this person is no longer cooperating with us with an agreed set of rules. This person is trying to dominate us and demanding submission. That's fight. Okay.
Hmm.
And at that particular point, we go into that alarm reaction. We go into fight, fight, or freeze, usually, unless we're really complex, super complex people. And you see this in relationships, complex relationships. You see this in people with a lot of self awareness. Um, Leah asks about spiritual bypassing. We see people who are aware of their spiritual bypassing. Someone else is projecting to them, I'm going to dominate you. And instead of responding with fight, flight, or freeze, I respond with social engagement, inviting them to come back into social engagement.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Someone's going to dominate me. My said fight, flight. I need to get away from you, or I need to dominate you. Okay, those are my two choices: domination, submission, or flight.
Now,
So
didn't
that
you just say a third choice there?
freeze,
Well, no, the freeze, but also the engage or the
social engagement.
social engagement. Yes.
The social engagement, the social engagement system, when it's activated, interiorly cancels out fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay. So that's what we prefer.
We prefer that.
Yes.
Humans prefer it. And there's some evidence, and I mentioned this before, that the human self domesticated between 50 and 70,000 years ago when there was this proliferation of tribes in Africa, and they were rubbing up against each other. And the people who cooperate intertribally had an advantage. And so during that 20,000 years, there were changes, not just in terms of people's social capacities, but in the genome that caused humans to be, their faces got flatter, their brains got bigger in a particular sense, the prefrontal cortex, and the people that were more social and more cooperative had an advantage. We prefer play, which is cooperation under an agreed upon set of rules.
Yeah. Then
And
why do we fight so much? Because some that doesn't work, right? Or it doesn't always work.
well, we fight because when our nervous system reads threat and doesn't believe that cooperation is possible, we go, okay, it's dominant submission.
Okay.
I got two
I
choices.
get it. I do that all the time.
Yeah. Well, and also you can see one of the things that has arisen out of the human social experiment, so to speak, that is now dominating this planet and probably will spread off this planet to other stars. One of the things that is dominating that whole flow is that if you can convince a group of people that cooperation is not possible with another group of people, then you can sell them on, we have to go dominate them.
Right.
We do not have to cooperate with them under an agreed upon set of rules.
Right.
Because we can't. Because
Right.
you can't cooperate with those people. You can't talk to those people.
Right.
You can't. The whole.
Well, we could even argue that there's truth to that, in that, when people are coming from two different worldviews, and, let's look at our current culture. We have people coming from a progressive postmodern worldview and from a traditional worldview. Then the poor moderns are stuck in the middle. But the traditionalists and postmodernists, they're right about that. They really actually can't communicate with each other. At least we haven't, great swaths of us can't.
That's right. Well, and not only that, but starting in the 80s and 90s, in the short run, what happened is there was a play between conservatives, progressives, where they would cooperate. We have a set of rules, and we will work together, and we'll move things forward. We'll make things happen.
Yeah.
Okay? We can play under certain circumstances. But then one side realized, this was the super far right, I can game the system. I can freeze the system and make nothing happen. And if I can do that, I can have power over the system. And now that play in the middle, where we can cooperate and make things happen, that's stopped. At that particular point, all kinds of things started happening interiorly in the United States, happened between people, and also happened internationally. Right now, look at China. Okay, China is so much more agile and effective at playing with the world than the United States. Why? The United States does not have a party freezing it from doing initiatives. China does not have a party freezing it from doing initiatives. China goes into Latin America and says, look, how about I build a port here? How about I build a road here? You give us resources and opportunities, and we'll do trade, and we'll play with you in these environments. China's actually doing that with its own people. They've raised 800,000 people to the middle class. Why? They don't have a party stopping them from raising people to the middle class. And part of what they're saying is we're demonstrating to you that maybe your democratic ideals aren't really as effective in terms of taking care of people and making things happen. And right now, that's true. Okay? Because the United States, who can't do anything because the system is frozen by one group that says I can have I can have power as long as I freeze the system, can't compete with a more agile superpower that can actually do things.
Yeah.
Play
All
with
right. I mean, I, I mean, we get back to sort of our different stories about that. I mean, I could argue that when we go back to particularly the United States, that if we talk about, I just think that what you're talking about is evolutionarily potent.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
we had a sort of a fused center modern consciousness after the war. I mean, this is that, stages of development where, after a cataclysm, there tend to be people get together and then they differentiate. And
Hmm.
we differentiated, and I wouldn't say that the right differentiated first if you consider the 60s.
Oh, that's a good point.
The whole
Good point.
left, the whole progressive worldview came online. It literally didn't exist in the cosmos, as far as we know.
And I want to point out, you're just demonstrating now the thing that Leah said about spiritual bypassing. Okay, this is me spiritual bypassing. This is me denying the excesses of the left because I'm pissed off at the right.
I
Okay,
know. Yeah.
and there it
There's
is.
plenty to be pissed off about. But yeah, I mean, it's evolutionarily potent that it came online. I mean, we just can't stay with Walter Cronkite forever.
Like that guy, though. Yeah.
I liked him too, but whatever. So we have this culture war, and that's where we're back to this idea of constraints, being constrained, preferring
Yes.
play, not getting each other, seeing each other as enemies because we really don't even have the ability to talk. I mean, Integral does. Integral starts to have the ability to talk to both, see
Yes, it
both,
does.
and really present an integration of the best of the warring parties. But
Well, Reich, the guy, he was I think the Treasury Secretary under Obama. He's a professor at Berkeley.
yeah, Robert Reich.
Robert Reich just wrote a book, and he says that essentially right now the United States is a loose oligarchy, in that what you have is you have a lot of corporations that are basically extracting from the group, from the collective, and being able to sell a narrative to the collective that the people that they're wanting to change our extracting system are actually the people that are extracting from you, and they're the people that you have to push against and you have to vote against and so on. And that's been very effective and is continuing to be effective. And so now we have all these polls that say 70 or 80% of Americans want this change and this cooperation, that cooperation, and it doesn't happen. Now, part of the
again, I would say that if you look at the last year, Keith, any reasonable definition of how fast we could move left.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's COVID. I mean, COVID fast forwarded our culture in 10 years in 1 year.
It did.
I mean, in so many ways. And this is
still
one of them. Yeah. I mean, we know that green economics is going to be more egalitarian. It's the moral development that we're growing into, that's going to happen. And also that I guess this is part of it, but that the baseline of a reasonable, decent lifestyle is raised.
Yes. Yes.
So that people have a participation in the system, and we can see where, the system as it is throwing off money and eddies and, ways that are stagnant, and that's all. We're waking up to that. But I think this last year has been, and also culturally with Black Lives Matter, women. Oh my God,
Me
the last,
too.
all of it, is even meat. McDonald's is coming out with plant burger, McPlant or something.
Or regenerative farming being
the soil, climate.
Well, and also going back to the second question, my opinions and attitudes and a way of dealing with the world has changed more in the last enough in the last couple of years that I've observed it, which is very, very difficult to observe change in your own consciousness because it
I
happens
know.
so slowly.
Yeah.
For instance, back in the 80s, 70s, remember the inflation that
Hmm.
happened?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, well, that's what happened when there was just too much green controlling the economy.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yeah, this current thing has been really good for the macro economy, for Wall Street and so on. But coming back to the original
Hmm. Yeah.
premise
Right on.
about all this stuff, we prefer to play, and and it's kind of pushing to well, what are the action steps around this? Well, with individuals and with couples, which is where the rubber meets the road with me because I do psychotherapy all day long, 4 days a week. Is couples will go into this is how we've always played. This is how babies play peekaboo. Okay, here's how baby plays peekaboo. Mom goes like this. Baby feels a little bit alarmed because mom's not around. Oh no! Starts going into a little bit of neuroception of safety, and mom goes, "Oh, here I am." Baby
Ah,
goes, "Oh, now I feel better." Oh, peekaboo. Okay, this is how play.
interesting.
This is how play happens at every level. Get a little threatened, and then we're back to social engagement. Little threatened, back to social engagement.
Neat.
This is how contracts are. Two big companies are doing some big deal with each other. Oh, I'm going to do this. Well, I'm going to do this. They have agreed upon set of rules, international rules, whatever. And, they're here, here, here. Okay, now we've done it. Okay, we've done
Yeah.
our deal. Okay, we've successfully played and made something happen. Okay, so even fighting, a couple of football players will just go kick the shit out of each other, but they know in the back of their mind, neither one of us knows we can pull out a knife and stick it in the other guy because there's an agreed upon set of rules that says we can kick the shit out of each other, but we can't get a knife and stick it in. So that provides it's play, even
Yeah.
though it looks violent and aggressive, and our violent
Yeah.
when our this is a human superpower. When our violent um, instincts are channeled into play, we are regulating out of domination submission into cooperation,
Yeah.
which is what you do in every social dilemma. I do it with couples. God, about 30% of my practice is couples. For almost in every hour of a couple that I work with, I probably help them regulate from domination submission into cooperation. I'd say on an average of 20 times in an hour,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that's an average.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 60 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you've got this intensified crucible of,
Yes.
them being there and you're,
The
doing your
container.
thing. Yeah. Goddamn right.
And right now, I think that one of the greatest things in the United States for moving things forward, besides all this upset which requires novelty, is people getting involved on the local level with their neighbors and with their communities to make things happen.
Yeah.
I want to fix the road. I want to fix the bridge. I want to take care of our homeless problem. What are we going to do about State Street? There's a lot of empty stuff. Okay, and so on those levels, there isn't as much of a freeze in the process, in my experience. There's a lot more room for cooperation, and I suspect that that's probably going to be the future. That out of those collaborative engagements, people are going to start electing representatives that say we're going to make something happen.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Eventually, even saying I will vote against party if I feel it's in the best interest of the principles that
Yeah.
people share, um, and that's going back to we prefer play, but if we believe that the choice is domination submission, we're going to push for domination.
Yeah.
So
Well,
as long
you,
as you
you
can,
mentioned in your notes about Leah's question, you wrote some notes to me that you, uh, that when, and I thought about this in terms of my own relationships with my friends. When one of my friends is coming on too strong, or, there's a fight energy going on, then, or I have that with them, that is a call to a constraint.
yes,
So I like that because then I know what's going on here. We're looking at sort of the basic mechanisms of,
yes,
the
primal
fuel.
causes,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So so I'm calling for a constraint, and so that then creates a boundary where a new level of play can happen.
Or if it's two, say it's two red power gods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's Genghis Khan and well, Genghis Khan never
Yeah.
got defeated,
Uh-huh.
but I don't know, somebody else, you know, I don't know, like France and England in the Hundred Years War. Okay, if it's two power gods, it's just okay. Either you submit, or I'm going to get you to submit, or I'm going to get you to submit. But if one of the people is not at red or amber submission, they're at orange. I want to do business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Or green. I want everybody, or even teal.
Mm-hmm.
At that particular level, to the person that is in the more complex consciousness, they go, okay, so you're dominate or submit. Nazi Germany, North Korea currently. Okay, as a collective person, Jung called this getting inflated. The collective goes, okay, now I have to respond and constrain you from dominating everything. And I'm going to keep doing that until you start playing, until you
Mm-hmm.
cooperate. So Germany and Japan they were going to expand, and they were going to either take over the world or they were going to be constrained. The world responded to the collective, we're going to constrain you. Then they said, the world that was not red power gods, now play with us. And they both said, okay, we'll play well. In fact, we'll play better than ever. And now German, two signature,
I mean, talk about evolution.
talk
Jesus
about
Lord. Yeah.
evolution. And you can freeze it for a while, like North Korea is doing now, or Japan did during the shogunate. I mean, it's astounding to me that in the 16th century, Japan was unified under a dictator, and then he began to organize the social structures, just like North Korea, really, to keep the rest of the world out and freeze his culture in place. And it stayed frozen in place
Yeah.
until Pershing showed up
Yeah.
in the 20th.
No, Keith, I'm watching I'm such an old man. I'm watching all these history documentaries about the barbarians and the Rome and the Egypt and the tribes and all this stuff, and the Huns and the Genghis Khan and Attila, and you're right. The pattern is you could have several hundred years of peace and prosperity if the certain sweet spot is hit. And there's not a lot of competition, and you find yourself in a nice place. That can go on for several hundred years. The human impulse to continue to grow and mess with things finally wins out, or somebody comes over the horizon, or you see a city gleaming on the hill that you want, and
That's
that
right.
happens. And then there's ruthless. I mean, you talk about, the ruthless brutality of human history is you can't even begin to wrap your head around. So,
Oh, yeah.
but the basic idea would be that these two armies, or these two warlords, the sort of the deal would be, okay, we're going to fight to the death, and the victor will reign in peace.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And if you talk about the basic mechanisms of human culture, that's it writ large.
And you can understand the short-term attraction. Genghis Khan had the largest, most peaceful empire that had ever been known.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that he did is he got rid of corruption. In other words, if you broke one of his laws, he killed you.
Yeah.
Right now, China's government is very popular to the Chinese people because, from the very beginning, has been working against corruption. And you talk to people in the countryside, and they say, we're no longer getting ripped off by the bullies and stuff because the government won't let them. So what that does is essentially give them human rights. I have the right to go down the road without some guy, getting some illegal toll. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in the short run, that could keep people happy, but in the long run, people are going to want more and more rights, which creates tension.
Yep.
Between we want to keep it the way it is, and then out of that will come some kind of constraint, and then will come new play.
Yeah.
That's evolution.
Well, in China is a very interesting case in that the Uyghurs and the police state that still exists.
Exists even better, even more effectively.
Yeah,
than
in some ways more benignly. In a way. I mean, to talk about the Uyghur concentration camps in any way like the Nazi concentration camps, you're missing the point. There's even an evolution of concentration camps. I mean, that's, you feel, I could feel a revulsion at even pointing that out. but it's true.
But it's true.
Yeah, and actually, what the Communist Party has to do in China is, and they've been doing it, is bring a 1.3 billion people into modernity, and that ain't easy. And part of what they have to do, and she's doing it, and I know there's a lot of liberals who are recoil at that, is, well, there's a couple things. One is this social equity system where people are rewarded for not jaywalking, and there's a score kept for your entire life. And it does have, of course, it is a surveillance state in a certain way, but it's tuned benignly and humanely in a way that supports good behavior.
Yeah.
The, you know, motherland China thing, the Confucianism, and the traditional Chinese, that has to be accommodated. We in the West thought modernity was just going to leave that all behind. And that's one of the, if you talk about, what have I learned in the last couple of years? That's not going to be left behind. The God and country people are not going to be left behind. And the Confucian and these pro-China nationalists, that has to be managed. That can be, there's no occurrence so far in history where people have become modern without going through hell. I mean, Armageddon.
Well, the Confucian bureaucracy created really one of the most stable empires in the world, enough so that they froze enough, because, a stable empire doesn't have conflicting, there's no guns, germs, and steels happening over there, okay? They were surpassed by the colonial. Even during the colonial time, what happened is the European countries said, we're going to cooperate with each other, and we're going to divide up the rest of the world, okay? But the rest of the world was being divided up because Spain and Portugal and England, United Kingdom, and the Dutch, they were all cooperating with each other, taking over the rest.
Well, they were modern. They could navigate. They had ships, they had steel, they had guns. Modern people at that stage, they have pre-modern minds. The consciousness isn't modern, but the weaponry is, and the technology is. They're going to do what pre-modern people do, which is go out and conquer what you can.
Dominate.
Yes.
So there's domination and submission. But at a particular point, if you don't kill everybody, like the Native Americans in the United States.
Or Genghis Khan, who killed, I was reading, roughly half of the people he conquered.
Yeah, Genghis Khan.
I mean, that's 50%, Keith.
Genghis Khan. One of my favorites.
I mean, that's one way of getting rid of corruption.
It really is. He would circle a city and he'd say, "Send me your ruling class, or I'll kill everybody."
Yeah.
Okay, so what the first city said, fuck you, and they basically killed everybody. The next city sent them the ruling class. Everybody got executed, and then they were part of the Mongol Empire. And Genghis Khan also apparently impregnated so many women in his life that there's a disproportionate amount of people alive today that have Genghis Khan genes in them.
I've heard that. I
mean,
you heard it from like the number one progeniturator ever in history. Yeah, so interesting.
And so that's the thing. So that instinct to prefer play over fight.
Yeah.
And then when that, so going back to Leah's question, when one individual, culture, or whatever insists on domination, the collective eventually responds with constraint. And the constraint ultimately isn't, we're going to destroy you, though Genghis Khan did that to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately is, we're going to constrain you until you start playing again, until you'll start cooperating with us under a mutually agreed set of rules, okay, until we can play.
Yep.
And that happens in a family. It happens with a 4-year-old who refuses to go to go to the dentist. It happens with a couple when they're not going to cooperate on something. They start screaming at each other. It happens between political parties. Eventually, right now, every time we hear a story about Republicans and Democrats working together on some initiative, at least for me as a progressive, when I hear that story, I feel good. But I suspect that 70 or 80% of Americans, conservative and progressive, who hear that, feel good. We prefer play over fighting.
Yeah.
We'll fight
and we could
if play isn't available.
Yeah. Well, and we can see with the evolution of humanity again that one of the, one of the things that's happening is that we're dealing with an ever larger circle of people that we can play with as we go
Yes.
through these stages.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, yeah, it read, I brutally conquer you. I mean, you submit, but then, there's an integration, and we could see that in Egypt with the conquered people, being brought back in chains, and they then become part of the integration. The barbarians came down to Rome. They actually wanted to be Roman. They had their little cities and stuff outside of Rome where they were trying, be in Rome, trying to be Roman. And, so, it's an interesting rewriting of history in a way for me, but that ever bigger circle, which is brutally brought forth in earlier stages. Now we have, in a way we could argue that the whole, not the whole world, but pretty close to it is able to play together.
I
Isn't
think
that
so.
something? I mean, not North Korea, not some,
Iran sometimes.
evolutionarily backwaters, but for the most part, the world is able to play with each other.
Now, what we're doing now, to all the integral geeks out there, this is where the zone thing really helps. Okay, zone 3 is looking at our shared interiors from the outside, and if we do that, we go, well, yeah, I guess we're always either playing or fighting, and we prefer playing. And now here's the thing: one of the vulnerabilities of the human race is that on a cultural level, if you get to Orange, the people that have been super successful in Orange and super wise, starting the first time I saw this was with the Roman Empire. If you can freeze the system to support you, the oligarchy, and if you can sell to the electorate, if you have an electorate, that the people who want change are actually the people that are causing the problems. You can keep yourself, as long as you're giving them something, bread and circuses, you can keep yourself in power. And right now in the United States, okay, turn on the TV, we have constant circus 24/7, and go to the store, and what do you get? Bread.
Yeah.
Bread and circuses. Yeah. And if we can convince the people that are being extracted that the people who want change are actually the people that are hurting you, we can keep it going for a while. But eventually that breaks down under the evolutionary force of somehow I don't feel like we're cooperating under an agreed upon set of rules to make things happen. Somehow I just feel like I'm being extracted. I'm going to protest against that. And in a democracy, that means there's elections and there's shifts of power. Yeah. And that's such an evolutionary
it's hard to overestimate the effect of free speech. And I know that sounds so quaint. And I have my liberal friends who roll their eyes because we don't have free speech. We have the corporate media. No, we have free speech, please. And that is that's different than Rome. That's different than Nazi Germany. That's different than North Korea. That's different than anything. It's different than China. Exactly. We see the tension with that in Iran and Russia and so forth, where the state just doing its best to control the media without being, completely oppressive. But as you say, the force of I want to know, I want to be out there, I want to get in the game is too strong.
It's too strong. And also, this is one area where the United States has always and will continue to compete, have a huge competitive edge over China. The United States, you can say anything that you want. You can say true stuff. You can criticize your government. You can criticize other people's government. And the head of the biggest Chinese corporation, I forget the name of it.
Jack Ma.
Okay, remember Jack Ma criticized the Chinese government and disappeared for 4 months.
Yeah.
Now, I assume that he went to the equivalent of a billionaire's re-education camp in China. Okay, so he's
Yeah,
kind of getting what the Uyghurs are getting. I mean, I
yeah,
assume in those concentration camps, they're not trying to kill them all; they're trying to turn them into
yeah,
non-Muslim Chinese.
yeah,
So he went to a billionaire re-education camp for 4 months, and they said, okay, now you can go out and be a billionaire now and everything, but no more criticizing the government. He went, okay, sure, no problem. Okay,
yeah,
and so that is one area. It's funny, the big mouth competition. Nobody can compete against big mouth Americans.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Nobody can compete against us with free speech.
no, no, it's as they say on the internet, it's blurst. It's blessed and cursed.
That's the cursed.
Yeah, but with to look at China, I mean, we can see the uh, rights and freedoms have grown enormously since the 60s and the Cultural Revolution. I mean,
That's right.
things like that, and even Tiananmen. But they're doing it their way, and I don't want to understate the horrors of the Uyghur camps. We don't want to be naive about that. And there's
Forced
stories
labor.
of forced labor and forced sterilization and
Yep.
brutality and so forth. That having an inner consciousness, we want to see it all. And also see the trends, also see the larger context of the unfolding of truth.
California has forced labor. You convicts can be used as forced labor. It's in the California Constitution, and now there is a law in California to stop forced labor in prisons.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the evolutionary force, and now this brings us to the second question. So how have you changed?
Yeah.
I never thought that I would be looking appreciatively at China giving more rights to farmers to be able to make more money and not be ripped off by the local sheriff. Um, I didn't think that I would have the understanding that I have, largely from our conversations. I think of there's a basic yearning in both political structures to make good things happen that's being blocked by power dynamics and by money dynamics, and by the momentum of history. Um, uh,
Yep.
that that there's also an evolutionary force happening where something different is going to arise. And this is the thing. I'm open. If China wants to show the world that they can take better care of people and reduce climate change and create more collaboration and give human rights to people in a one party system, I don't want to live in that system, but I'm much more interested in how that system evolves than I was before.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No,
why?
yeah.
We've changed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's and that would be roughly on the trends that we've identified all along in this conversation is just a greater complexity of mind.
Yeah.
The ability to see, for years we were raised, there's China, this thing, this big two-dimensional thing. And now over time, we see the communists and we see the this, and then we see the growth, and we see the gleaming cities, and we see the smog, and we see the Uyghurs, and we see the Hong Kong. And it's my thing. Evolution is beautiful. We can see the trends towards greater freedom, liberty, decency for sure. I mean, out of poverty, 1 billion people, amazing, but it ain't pretty.
Yeah.
Beautiful, but not pretty. And that, I guess, if there's anything for me that would characterize what I've learned, well, I've learned that to be to take a different attitude towards the people I thought were my enemies.
Well, in terms of, you've been doing the Daily Evolver for 10 years. You and I have known each other much longer than that. We've been doing this. This is what I observe in you. What I observe in you is you always look for the larger understanding. If you get pissed off or you get a doctrinaire or you get in a rigid position, your first unconscious response is to look for a larger understanding. It's not, it doesn't require any effort. Okay, that's your consciousness being changed. Um, and until you have a larger understanding, you're not real confident about what you're saying. And I'm getting to, I will get in doctrine or positions every once in a while, but I'm getting more suspicious
Yeah.
of the, okay. For me, it's if I don't feel like I have compassionate understanding, I'm suspicious of where I'm coming from. Certainly that plays out on the, I'm seeing this with individuals and couples that I work with, because on an interior level, when dealing with our different parts of ourselves, the play fight dynamic is the same dynamic. Essentially, if I'm fighting with myself on an interior level, I have an internalized conflict. Internalized conflict is how Freud defined neurosis.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can get different parts of myself collaborating with an agreed upon set of rules to create more novelty, I'm now having interior play
Wow.
instead of interior conflict. What does that do? That radically amplifies the evolution of my consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay? And when you're doing therapy, you're actually looking individually and interpersonally both from the upper left and the lower left. You're looking for those conflicts, because in the confusion and distress and the rigidity of those conflicts, there are transformational opportunities. So you bring attention to bear there until those parts start
Oh
cooperating instead of
my
competing.
God. It's like massaging a knot in your muscle. I
Exactly.
mean, you do a tender and you try this side and that side, and you don't push too hard, but you find it yielding,
Yes.
and then you do it some more and then it gives way. And there's this wonderful rush of blood into that area that was so constricted and light. And it's something like that.
Is it?
And,
Yes.
and you put it so beautifully. And thank you for, sort of defining some of these mechanisms that come into play. Because I will correct one thing you said. My reflexive position is not for the larger understanding. If we
Looks
could
like
go
it to
back,
me.
well, thank you. But my reflective position is fear and loathing. So, and sometimes it's pretty stubborn. I want to say. I mean, I have a couple friends that I have really sort of, we're hitting Rock of Gibraltar versus Rock of Gibraltar.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
big, heavy tectonic conflicts, not in bad ways. Actually, to the degree that you're right, is that I have a certain playful attitude about it. But I will say this, and this is new, that I do see that is a red flag for me, or a green flag maybe,
Yeah, there you
to go deeper in this direction that you're talking about, that there is a new level of play beyond that I can go for. And I actually have done it in a couple cases. And inevitably, it's about...
Well, give an example. I mean, you don't have to
yeah,
violate
okay.
somebody's privacy, but what's an example where you've gone beyond it, Jeff?
Oh, there's several, but one is... here's the thing. I talk to a group of people regularly, and there's one person who is just particularly diametrically opposed to a lot of what I have to say, but they're integral, and they understand the integral model inside and out, and that drives me crazy, because how could they understand it and not agree with me?
Right.
But here's what I have laid aside. They're not going to agree with me, and they don't have to agree with me. And it's more interesting for all of us if we don't, and he does the same thing back, where he tries to colonize me, so it's
I know
the
who
domination.
you're talking about. I can see this.
It's the domination submission,
Yeah.
both ways. And for me, and I think for him too, it's just almost like that massage. I mean, even though we went in there with, guns a-blazing, over time, we've just become a little more interested in the other. And actually, I think we've surrendered. We give up. I mean, I know that I'm not going to win him over. So for the larger community, for this larger group that we're often arguing in front of, I realize that the way forward is to present my position. And I know I'm not going to win him over, but I may, to the degree that it wins people over, it wins the day. That's evolution working with me here,
Well, it sounds like play
and
to
to the
me.
degree that it doesn't, and, he gets to put his point out and they agree. And sometimes I think, why are you agreeing with him?
Yeah, yes.
I mean, he's wrong,
He's wrong. I'm right.
wrong.
Wrong.
But it's more playful, Keith.
It's
I mean,
play.
that damn word, if that isn't the key to the city, play, I don't know what is.
That's what it was so exciting about me. It came to me when I was listening to a talk by Stephen Porges about the polyvagal system. And the guy says, well, what's happening when you're not um, engaged in fight flight? He said, play. And I thought, okay. And all of a sudden, like a flood of other research, for instance, fear and loathing. Fear and loathing is you having judgments. Okay. Now, my nervous system judges, and it does it.
And me having fear. I mean, there's somebody who thinks, they're gonna. I mean, if my way of thinking isn't the correct one, then I'm in danger.
You are, yes, and you perceive danger, and you respond to it with disapproval. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there's Jonathan Haidt wrote a book on basic moral principles. He thinks that there's 6 basic moral foundations that are all solutions to evolutionary problems. Freedom versus oppression, fairness versus unfairness, loyalty versus betrayal. All of these things are evolutionary problems that were solved by developing a drive, an instinct to be moral in those particular areas. So when you feel fear and loathing, these are both forms of judgment, what these are subtle forms of social constraint, where my disapproval of you is put over there as a constraining influence on my opinion that you're engaging in some kind of behavior that is immoral or impractical or something, and you just you receiving it in a benign fashion is part of the game. Maybe you be influenced, maybe you're not being influenced, but this is how we try to influence each other. Now, if I can still connect with you in love, but still disapprove of stuff that you're saying, this is basically at that moment, I'm at a teal altitude.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, at teal altitude, evolution is particularly accelerated. And where does teal go when it evolves?
Yeah.
It goes to this conversation. It goes to turquoise. It goes to joining with like-minded people to try to serve the greater good.
Yeah. And what I've realized about these teal and turquoise levels is they're significantly more complex than orange and green.
Yeah.
And part of that complexity manifests in that people believe all kinds of shit.
That's true.
I mean, I have friends, the smartest people in the world, and this one believes Bush brought down the trade tower, and this one talks to aliens, and this one, they're all this one loves Trump. They have an integral sensibility, and we're just going to have to live with it and become curious about it instead of critical about it in a way that's playful, because there's a lot of juice there.
The hardest part of this, way back, remember when we had the Integral Conference, the one where everybody was honoring Ken? We did it in Denver. And you went on stage and talked about the myth of the infinite cornucopia by Willisek.
Yes.
I can't pronounce.
I know the Polish. Yes, exactly.
Polish guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the infinite cornucopia.
Polish philosopher.
Philosopher.
And the law of the infinite cornucopia.
Yeah. The law of infinite cornucopia is that whatever position you have, there is some data to support it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it's so hard for me. I listen to a lot of cutting edge health practitioners. I listen to a lot of cutting edge psychotherapy practitioners. And so you can get biochemical, molecular, and epidemiological support for, say, being a carnivore, not eating plants. You can get support for the vaccines being bad for you. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Or the vaccines saving your life.
Yeah.
You can get support for taking high doses of certain vitamins, and then you can get support for that's bad for your body. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, these are well-meaning, intelligent, educated, cutting-edge people that have their thing that they're excited about,
Yep.
and I listen to that, and there's a part of me that goes, "Oh my God!
Yeah.
So should I take vitamin C?
Yeah.
Should I
And should
not?
I take a bottle a day, or should I take one capsule? And what
Yeah."
kind of fat do I eat with it? And yeah, you can go nuts with this stuff.
And then what do they all agree on? And then when you find what people agree on, like for instance, we all agree that love and cooperation is better uh, interpersonally. Um, uh, happy couples. Happy couples make are are good friends, and they prioritize their lover relationship. And when there's conflict, they look for a way that they can both get through it. Okay, everybody can see that and agree with that. Um, everybody can look at the data on regenerative farming
Yeah.
and on grazing. We can see how that creates more soil and sequesters more carbon, and is one of the obvious solutions to climate change. There's certain kind of through lines
Yeah.
that are
Well,
just
food. I mean, that it's
yeah, food.
real, and that it's fresh, and that
Yeah,
it's varied,
organic.
and that it has color to it, and that
There's no
uh,
Roundup on it.
yeah, there's some things that I just, when I read all of this diet stuff, I just go back to, let me just eat what's good,
Yeah, he cleans. So
and then a bag of Oreos occasionally.
oh, once in a while. So the infinite cornucopia gets me confused. But on the other hand, it's just like you said,
Do we
I
want to go back to Walter Cronkite?
no, I don't. And also one of the things that's changed more is I'm much more tolerant of being confused.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
I used to
Thank
be
you, Keith.
embarrassed about being confused, so I'd have to kind of create some certainty. I'm not as embarrassed being
No,
confused anymore.
it's
It's
a
like I don't
fertile,
know.
it's a fertile field,
Yeah.
confusion. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for that. That's good.
well, on that note, on the
Yes.
note of honoring,
Now that we've, got everybody positively confused.
we got everybody positively confused. Let's declare victory. We will declare victory. We will declare coherence and evolution on our conversation.
That's right. Yeah, we got it all figured out again.
Ah,
All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Keith Witt. Anything new
thank you
that
so
people
much.
need to know about?
Anything new that people need to know about?
Your books or your courses or
Nothing new.
okay.
I'm in a period of deep study right now. Um, there's several areas that have captured my imagination. This is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The play fight. Another one was Emily Nagoski's new book, "Come as You Are" on female sexuality. Um, it's
That's great. What a great title.
I know it's a great title, and Jonathan Haidt's book on the moral foundations. I, I'm I'm finding those ideas very useful in my psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Fantastic. And of course, people can find your stuff at drkeithwitt.com.
drkeithwitt.com. You can find my books. You can find my classes. You can find my lectures. You can find many shrinking pundits
Yes.
with me and my friend Jeff Salzman over the last 7 years.
Right on. Yeah. And you can find my stuff at dailyevolver.com. And yeah. So thanks so much.
Dailyevolver.com is a touchstone for the integral world.
Yeah. Well,
And it's a guy. It's a lot. The Daily Evolver is a map of the integral awakening. And it's an important one. I was just reading the Integral Spirituality recently and just falling in love again, and all it
Ken Wilber's book.
Yeah. I mean, you open up one, you and I have talked about this. Any random page of any of his books, you read that and you go, oh my God, oh my God. But there's something about the Daily Evolver and the people that you talk to on Daily Evolver that humanizes and concretizes the integral message. And it's just such an important contribution. So I just want to honor 10 years of Daily Evolver.
Thank you, Dr. Keith. Well, may it be so, and more to come.
So.
Yes. And so we'll see you next time.